For the first time in more than 5.5 years, we finally tonight have a few new answers to a question that has loomed over Indiana and over the town of Delphi. Who killed Abby Williams and Libby German?
From the end of the bridge to, you got to go through. Now, I believe that the bodies were found about 50.
Born from a family's grief and determination. In April of 2020, Army soldier Vanessa Guillen went missing while stationed at one of the largest military installations.
You hear that little music in the background that goes, "Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious."
Right.
Knew about it or was there. He's as guilty as the person who committed it.
Chilling details in the arrest of a suspected serial killer caught before he could strike again.
Him, they dropped the ball, man. They said he went AWOL, and that he was a deserter, and nobody went to look for him.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder.
Like I said, we're going back. We were asked last time to kind of talk about the food, the grub truck video, and kind of give our perspective of it. The press release from the police department, it indicated that they're still trying to put pieces together from that night. Does that worry you at any point or at any bit that they're still trying to put those pieces together?
It's been over 5 weeks since little Kaylee Anthony vanished. Her mother, Casey, has been arrested for lying to police. She's being held without bail.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel. Alongside with me is no one. Not today, at least. Today it's going to be myself, and today we're talking about Delphi. We're talking about Richard Allen. There's been some movement in the case. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let me pull it up real quick. All right. So we have a couple of things that we're going to be going over today. First and foremost, there's been 3 documents that have been dropped. And I mean, they got some huge claims in these documents. We're going to be going over them. We're going to be going over the documents, the claims, and how they fit with the case in hand. And then we're going to be going into the video, the interview of Bill Lobato, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He was one of the attorneys that was assigned to Richard Allen after Bozzi and Baldwin were taken off. Now, Rozzi and Baldwin have since been reappointed, and he is no longer defending Richard Allen. So we're going to go through what his statements were in the second half of the show. So without further ado, let's get into this. All right. So this is the order or judgment of the court. This one page. This is State of Indiana plaintiff versus Richard M. Allen. The court having defendants verified motion to disqualify filed January 28, 2024. Defendants affidavit filed January 28, 2024. And certification of Richard Allen's attorneys under advisement, having considered the pleadings, now denies the verified motion to disqualify without hearing, as Indiana Supreme Court unanimously denied defendant's previous request on January 18th, 2024. So apparently this says that there was a previous motion to disqualify and it did not go in the defendant's favor previously. I think that's what this says. All right. And so this is where it gets kind of good, though. I mean, this is where it gets really crazy. Now, hit that like and subscribe button, by the way, guys. Ring that notification bell if you haven't done so. I appreciate that. Let's get this content out there. If you're on different forums, whether it's, Delphi forums or Bryan Kohberger forums, share our content out there with those forums. We'd appreciate it. Let them know that when we're going live and what we're going to be talking about. It'd be great. All right. So let's continue. This is the motion to dismiss for destroying exculpatory evidence. Now, this is huge. These are huge claims, right? So you have the State of Indiana plaintiff versus Richard Allen. Comes now accuse Richard Allen by and through counsel Andrew Baldwin and Bradley Rozzi pursuant to the 5th and 6th, 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution, moves this court to dismiss charges against the accused for destroying exculpatory evidence in violation of the standards set out in Brady versus Maryland. That's huge. These are some big accusations. In support of said motion, the accused states the following. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. Richard Allen stands accused of murdering two victims on or about February 13, 2017. Since receiving discovery on this case, the defense has unearthed significant evidence that third parties named Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall were involved in the murders. That evidence is critical to the theory of the defense. All right. So we also have to remember that when you go back to that 136-page memorandum or document that Richard Allen's defense team dropped on Odinus, they mentioned that when it came to the Odinus theory and uncovering the evidence that was there about possibility of Odinus being involved, that was hidden from them. All right. That was hidden from his attorneys. They had to go and find that. I found that to be kind of odd and suspicious. I'm not one for big conspiracies and things like that. And I try to look at things logically and try to explain things with, using critical thinking. But the stuff that keeps coming up on here, I got to call a spade, and be honest about this. This is some weird stuff. And the way that this is acting, or the way that the prosecution and law enforcement is acting in this case, or how they, are coming about this case and trying to try this man, is concerning. I still think that Richard Allen did have a part in this case. The timeline is pretty tight. I think he was there. I think he was on the bridge. Now, was there somebody else involved? Were there other people there? Maybe not. I don't know. But the way this is going, if it was him, I'm starting to get nervous that, those little girls aren't going to get justice if it was him, just because regardless of anything, I think that it's going to be very difficult to find this guy guilty amongst 12 jurors, given what we know already and the issues that they've already had to go through. Yeah, I find it very, it's going to be a big hurdle to get a conviction on this one, 100% in my opinion. So let's continue this. The defense would incorporate into this motion the contents of a Frank's memorandum that was filed with this court on September 18, 2023, which provides the details of the evidence that supports Brad Holder's and Patrick Westfall's involvement in the murders. In the discovery, the defense found a document dated February 17, 2017, so that's about 4 days after the fact, that appears to be an FBI report memorializing an interview of Brad Holder. Contained within the document are these words. The below is an interview summary. It is not intended to be verbatim. Account does not memorialize all statements made during the interview. Communications by parties in the interview room were electronically recorded. The recording captures actual words spoken, emphasis added. So in that document that they got, there is claims that there is an interview and that there are recordings of this interview, whether it's just verbatim. All right. Also in discovery, the defense found a document dated February 19, 2017, that appears to be memorialized, and an interview with Patrick Westfall. The report itself does not indicate whether the interview was recorded, although the defense would expect the standard procedure would require video and audio recording of all statements. It depends. It depends on where it occurred. I would think that you would try, to try to record that interview. But, if you're having a hard time getting the guy to come into the station, right? Let's just say you're the investigator and you're having a hard time getting this guy to come in and you're the detective. You go to his house and let's just say he starts talking to you and he's willing to talk to you either at his house or inside the vehicle or his vehicle. All right. And if he's controlling that situation as to where you're at, there might be an issue with trying to record if the intention was to bring him back to the station and record in an interrogation room or even in the patrol vehicle that may be equipped with video surveillance to record. That's where you would expect that. But, there are situations where that doesn't come into play. Why they don't have, the first one, I'm not sure. Why they don't have holders is concerning. After locating this document, the defense sought a copy of the recording detailed in February 17, 2017 report so that the defense could listen to the exact spoken words of Brad Holder during this interview. That is vital to Allen's defense, particularly the statements that the author of the document admits were not memorialized in the document. Give me 1 second, y'all. All right. Also, the defense requested a copy of all audio video of Patrick Westfall's interview that was memorialized in February 19, 2017 report. On September 8, 2023, the prosecutor communicated in a letter that there were no audio or video interviews of Brad Holder or Patrick Westfall available. Prosecutor McLeland offered no explanation as to why these didn't exist. Before the defense had an opportunity to investigate the reasons why these material pieces of evidence were not available, Prosecutor McLeland called for the disqualification of attorney Rozzi and Baldwin as Richard Allen's lawyers. Now, I get that it looks suspicious given the timing in which those things had occurred, but there was some pictures leaked, and the process in disqualifying those attorneys went around that process. Now, it'd be one thing if the leaked pictures happened early on in this investigation, early on as they were appointed, and it didn't get brought up until this point. That wasn't the case. It was brought up, it was found, it was discovered, and then the process of disqualifying began. The investigation started, and so on and so on. So it wasn't like all of a sudden it came out of nowhere, for one, and two, it wasn't an extremely long time where it's obvious that that's what they were doing. I just want to throw that out there. All right. Judge Gold, without a great deal of hesitation, said she was leaning toward granting McClellan's request. Ultimately, Judge Gold caused Rozzi and Baldwin to be taken off the case. This occurred before Baldwin and Rozzi learned of why the crucial videotape interviews were missing. On January 31st, 2024, after being reinstated to the case, the prosecution turned over discovery to the defense, including a letter cataloging the evidence that the prosecutor was turning over to the defense. Contained on page 5, paragraph 5 of the itemization of discovery are these words that explain Brad Holder's missing videotape interview and Patrick Westfall's missing interview, if one existed. Due to a DVR program error discovered in 9/20/2017, all recordings up to February 20th, 2017 were recorded over. There's no detectable audio found on this drive. That's crazy. I don't know how, I don't know, first and foremost, who would have taken these interviews, if that was, Carroll County, or if it was the Indiana State Police. But if it were, Indiana State Police and their detectives, I find this very difficult to believe. Because back in the early 2010s, late 2000s, the departments that I was, working with and aware of, and every department that I knew at the time, and of course it's different. I'm in Texas, but all of those had they weren't using DVRs. I mean, it says a DVR program error. So the way it used to work was you would get you would have all your stuff stored on a video or on a disc, and then you'd have to take it out and turn that into evidence every so often, right? The computer in your or the camera in your patrol unit will tell you when it's full or when it's about to be full and it needs to be replaced. They let it lapse and then record it over it. That's real suspicious to me. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And I think that this is going to end up hurting this case. I remember Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal were interviewed during this very short window of February 14th through the 20th, within days of the murders. The videotape interviews were deleted by the police. It is unknown what other interviews were deleted during this relevant time frames. And that's the other thing. If they were actually like deleted, you know, from my knowledge, when it comes to those type of things, it takes a high-ranking officer. And usually, typically, it's only like a handful of officers that have access and control of deleting any type of video surveillance, or video recordings by either dash cam or body cam, things like that. It wasn't just like the officer can go in there and delete it. It was impossible. Like if I was on patrol and something were to happen and I wanted to delete it, I couldn't. There was no way I could. I had no access for it. No, none of those things. There was one guy, maybe two guys outside of the chief, who had access into getting into that, and if deleting it was a possibility. If you try to delete it, I think it would even notify, your upper command that something weird was going on. All right. The destruction of material interviews of key suspects early in the investigation demonstrates negligence, if not intentional, conduct of the part of the state. How could law enforcement, while investigating the most serious of crimes, record over interviews of material suspects with reckless intentionality? I agree. I agree 100%. As material part of this defense, Richard Allen is expected to direct attention toward Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal as being involved in the murders of these two young victims. The evidence will allow to show that Richard Allen does not know Brad Holder or Patrick Westphal, and therefore Richard Allen had nothing to do with the murders. I mean, you don't necessarily have to know those two individuals to be involved in the murders. I believe those two individuals had, an alibi during the time of the murders. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't direct people to commit this crime. Right now we have, was it Mercer, I think was his name, was the connection between Patrick Westphal and Elvis Fields. Now, from my knowledge, Elvis Fields, or from what's out there, Elvis Fields doesn't necessarily know Patrick Westphal or vice versa. They haven't met. They don't know each other. He was a person that was wanting to be recruited. Right. So is it possible that, Richard Allen may not have known those guys, but was in conversation with some of the guys that he had that were part of that Odinist group? And maybe perhaps he wasn't yet a part of it. And so you're looking at persons that are recruits. I mean, how much interaction does a recruit have with the leader of a group when it comes to this type of scenario? There's a lot of members in this group. You get what I'm saying? I hope that makes sense. So I don't think that because necessarily they're not involved, that means he has nothing to do with it. I think that's a pretty far out there statement. You know what I mean? All right. This destroyed videotape interview of Holder and Patrick Westphal, if ever existed, is expected to contain evidence that could provide exculpatory evidence and material evidence in support of Richard Allen's defense. If the recording of Westphal was never secured, that too is purposeful or negligent failure to preserve material and exculpatory evidence. And the other thing is, too, the reason why you want it is you want to be able to compare and contrast with what their statement was in the past to what their statement may be once they take the stand. Right. So if Patrick Westphal says that, or let's put it Brad Holder, he said that he was at the gym and he got there at 2:00. And if, under conversation or up there on the stand, he says that he didn't get there until 3:00, or at 1:00 earlier than he said he was, that's a difference of what he had said. And perhaps maybe there's more that he's trying to hide. Right. So, that's where that stands, in my opinion. Elvis and Holder. I don't know. Maybe. From what I had read in that deal there was that Mercer was the connection between Elvis and whether it was Holder or Patrick Westphal, but I could have sworn it was Patrick Westphal. Experienced defense lawyers fully understand the significance of comparing and contrasting the accuracy of credibility. This is just what I said. The credibility of one's video and audio tape statement with the information that is represented by law enforcement officers and police reports or summaries. It is through this process that Richard Allen would have been able to challenge the veracity of the statements of Holder and Westphal. However, the statements intentionally or negligent destruction of the original recordings deprive the accused of such opportunity. The state's actions have deprived the defense the ability to compare Brad Holder's words from February 2017, only 3 days after the victim's murder, to the evidence that was unearthed over the next several weeks, months, and years. This would have allowed Richard Allen to determine whether Holder's story was consistent with unknown evidence at the time of Holder's first statement, and whether it is consistent or inconsistent with a future testimony, that trial testimony or disposition testimony or statements made to other persons / witnesses. That's very true. That's exactly what I was saying right before I read that. In any criminal investigation, the interview of potential witnesses must be preserved, such as the precise words of Holder and Westphal in their 2017 interviews, because an additional information is developed. Reviewing prior to statements may reveal inconsistencies or raise questions about other interviews because the additional information is developed. Reviewing prior statements may reveal inconsistencies or raise questions about witnesses or other information relevant to the unbiased investigation. Without an actual audio video that would provide exact words spoken from Brad Holder's mouth, the accused Richard Allen will never, ever be able to know exactly how many inconsistencies existed in the original statement of Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal when compared to the evidence that was later discovered in future testimony. Holder and Westphal, nor can Richard Allen challenge the credibility of Holder and Westphal in the light of subsequently discovered evidence. And that's huge too. I mean, you have to wonder why, right? Like why is this destroyed or missing? Now, if we put our conspiracy hats on and we can say, all right, so this was deleted by somebody higher up. Maybe perhaps they said something in the initial interview that didn't jive with something that they found later. And so that person that's higher up then now has to go and delete that information, knowing that their story no longer jives with the evidence. And I think that's what they're trying to say. What they're trying to say is that law enforcement maybe perhaps found some information later on after their initial testimony that contradicts what they say. And if so, they will never know about it. And I think that's an issue. You know, I think that's a huge issue. Now, is it possible that it got recorded or, you know, and this was just an accident? Maybe. I mean, if we look at how the arrest of Richard Allen came about, they lost his statement for 5 years. So if that's the case, it does seem like a history of negligence and incompetence at the very least. And so, like I said, even if it was Brad Holder, let's just say it was Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal, because of the arrest of Richard Allen and the evidence that they have against him, you know, his statement that he was there, the bullet that has the extraction marks that match his own gun, it's going to be difficult to prove anybody else was involved or that he wasn't the guy either. So this is going to turn into a situation where if Richard Allen ends up winning this dismissal, I find it very unlikely that anyone will be found guilty for this crime at any point on this. And that's just sad. And it's horrible. You know, no justice for these little girls. And, you know, I'm just calling a spade and being honest with that. I find that it's going to be very difficult, in my opinion. All right, let's continue. Furthermore, Allen is deprived of the ability to confront either suspect with their own words, contradicting self-serving testimony that may offer throughout the investigation. On August 30, 2023, following dispositions in the state of Indiana, law enforcement learned the defense believed Brad Holder to be an actor in the murders. Law enforcement finally re-interviewed Holder for what is believed to be the first time since 2017. While in 2017, according to the memorialized report, Brad Holder told law enforcement that he never met Abby Williams and was purportedly dating his son. His story changed in 2023 when I talked to law enforcement. In 2023, Holder told the interview at 3909 mark, I barely even knew that girl. I met her once. So there is changes. And I think that once you have this one change, that's an issue. And, you know, memory is a tricky thing too. Now, I'm not saying about this situation here. I think that, you know, him saying he never met her and now saying that he did meet her once, you know, that's not something that can be mistaken, right? Like, for instance, if you said, I only saw one person on the trail that day, and then, a couple of days later, you remember that you did actually saw a second person. It was at the beginning of the trail, was, very barely when you got there, and it was insufficient. If you change that later, I actually saw two people. I have to remember, that is a product of time, right? As length of time continues, memory continues to fade, and accuracy continues to fade, and the ability for contradicting statements arise. That's kind of like when we talk about the, Bryan Kohberger case and why I think that they're stalling. It's something like this, if that makes sense. Let's see. Therefore, one material and highly relevant contradiction exists. It is therefore plausible that many more contradictions would have been available to the defense, but the state's intentional or negligent failure to preserve all of the evidence. Such negligent and intentional conduct on the part of the police also resulted in the absence of material evidence which could be exculpatory of nature. The circumstance in of itself violates Richard Allen's due process rights. We must, however, place such conduct in a greater and more noteworthy context. It has also been discovered that the former Rushville police officer Todd Click reached out to the prosecutor McClellan in an attempt to bring to his attention the existence of an 85-page report summarizing the investigation that revolved around Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall and other affiliates. This letter, which landed on Prosecutor McClellan's desk via certified mailing on May 1st, 2023, was not discovered by the defense until more than 4 months later on September 8th, 2023. That's weird, man. Like, that is weird. I'm not going to lie. Now, I know that there's a process that has to go through, right? The letter has to go through court processing. And what that means is, is it, what is exculpatory, what is not exculpatory? If it does need to, is it evidence that pertains to the court or not? And then once it's signed off and cleared, then it gets transferred over. But 4 months later, I think that's a little long. And again, it comes after they never, law enforcement or prosecution never informed Richard Allen's, attorneys that there was a possible Odinist angle that they were investigating early on in this investigation. Nothing was turned over until they spoke about it, saying that they knew about it. You know what I mean? Let's see. What's up, Steve? Because I experienced the loss of a handwritten confession, the recording and the transcript confession due to transcript error prior to trial. I only had my notes and the Miranda form, several tough hours on the stand, but the jury returned a guilty verdict. That's possible. The thing is, though, I don't think that in your situation there, Steve, there was a lot of, surrounding issues, right? The law enforcement and the prosecution wasn't hiding the fact that, there was another investigation, like in this situation. I mean, I don't know what your situation was, but in this situation here, law enforcement or the prosecution was hiding the fact of the Odinist angle. They didn't even tell them about Brad Holder or Patrick Westfall to begin with. And it may not have been because of, and it's quite simple. The reason why they didn't bring it out is probably because they knew they lost the interviews. And so in an attempt that maybe perhaps that wouldn't be discovered, they never turned over the information to the defense team. But now that they found it, it looks even worse than if they would have just came forward and said, we suspected these individuals. We interviewed this guy. However, due to an error, this is what happened. So let's see. This letter landed on the prosecutor's desk on May 1st, 2023, was not discovered to the defense more than 4 months later on September 8th, 2023. And only after the defense disclosed and dispositions that they were aware of the Odinist ties to the crime scene and the investigation. See, that's exactly what I'm saying. They didn't give it up until the defense disclosed that they were aware of it. That is huge. I'm not going to lie. That is huge. That is big, especially with all the evidence that's kind of pointing into possibility of another direction and or more involvement. In my opinion, I think it's probably the latter, the more involvement aspect of it versus the complete non-involvement of Richard Allen. Like I said, I do believe that he was there. I think he was the guy on the bridge. The timeline is too close. You know, he said that he got there at 1:30. He saw a group of girls walking out of the trail at 1:30. A group of girls that came forward described seeing a man coming into the trail at around the same time. They had a picture that they took on a bench at 1:26 prior to leaving. So there is a time-stamped photo relating what time it was that they walked off of the bridge, putting Richard Allen there at 1:30. It's about a 13 to 15 minute walk from the entry of the bridge to the Monhon High Bridge. And, you know, that would put him there around 1:41 to 1:45. You know, the first witness or the second witness, you know, parks at the Myers entrance and walks to the Monhon Bridge at 1:46. Now, the Myers entrance is closer to the bridge, I think, by more than half. You know, I think it's closer than halfway from the entrance of the bridge. So if Richard Allen got there, walked to the bridge and looked at the fish in the manner that he said he would, and then turned around and walked back, he would have ran into her. Right. And now she ran into the girls walking back out of that area after she saw the guy on the bridge. So, you know, all those things lead me to believe that the guy was there. You know, it's kind of hard to say that he wasn't, in my opinion. But with all this stuff here, I think it's going to make it very hard to just get a. I think they're going to have to come forth with something and some more evidence, and maybe even a tie to Odinist or some Odinist tie to, or at least knowledge that there was Odinist group. You know, one of the things that the defense team is saying is that he had no knowledge of what Odinism was and things like that, which we'll go into a little bit further. But just like I said right here, it's going to make it very difficult. The failure to disclose on the part of the prosecutor, not entirely intentional, raises the level of untimely failure to disclose of potential exculpatory evidence. The failure to disclose sheds further suspicion of the absence of the Holder and Westfall interviews referenced herein. Furthermore, as explained in the Franks memo, it appears that law enforcement and possibly the prosecutor himself attempted to conceal the identity of a Purdue professor who contradicts the sworn words of Trooper Jerry Holman and Sheriff Tony Liggett concerning whether the crime scene contained signs of involvement of an Odinist cult. That, I mean, like I said, when you add all these little things together, it kind of does look that way, you know. Well, they couldn't come up with the professor's name, remember? I found that to be kind of weird and suspicious. I'm not going to lie. So, let's see. A more recent discovery, defense also located a prepared search warrant application for AT&T and data contained for Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall's mobile devices. Each application states that Holder and Westfall is a known member of a religious sect and elements of the murder have potential religious significance. The information being requested is relevant to an ongoing criminal investigation. There is no evidence that that warrant was ever served. Really? So they don't... It's not good. Also, the defense has not located any discovery regarding any data contained on Holder or Westfall's 2017 phone or any electronic devices. It defies logic that law enforcement would conduct forensic examinations of so many other phones in its investigation, yet ignore the phones of Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall, who were viewed as suspects within 3 days of the murders and interviewed by law enforcement, who then prepared search warrants for those phones. Though these suspicious facts further call into question the circumstances surrounding the destruction of key videotaped statements of Holder and Westfall, what if ever existed, and support Richard Allen's motion to dismiss the charge filed by the state of Indiana. Defendant requests a hearing at which time he can present evidence and make arguments as to why these charges should be dismissed. The defense files a contemporary herewithin this memorandum in support of this motion. That's the end of this one. I mean, it's some crazy accusations there. And I think they have an argument at the very least. I think they have an argument. Well, honestly, I think they got more than an argument. I think they got a case. I think they got a case to really throw a wrench into this entire investigation. This is the third document that was released, is the Memorandum of Law in Support of Dismissal at the issue of the purposeful and negligent failure to preserve or the destruction of material exculpatory evidence critical to the defense of Mr. Allen. It also involves the attempt to conceal the identity of key witnesses later identified as Professor Jeffrey Turcotte and other exculpatory evidence, such as Todd Click letter and evidence referred to by Click in his letter. Indiana Code states that the court may, upon motion of the defendant, dismiss and information upon certain grounds. In this case, the defendant requests the court to dismiss the information pursuant to Indiana Code, which states that a motion to dismiss and information may be granted for any other ground that is basis for dismissal as a matter of law. Such grounds would include a violation of defendant's constitutional right of due process. Additionally, the trial courts have inherent authority to dismiss criminal charges where the prosecution of such charges would violate the defendant's constitutional rights. Section 3534(1)(4) is merely legislative recognition of this authority. Such grounds would include a violation of defendant's constitutional right for due process. A motion to dismiss based on ground of specific may be reviewed at any time before or during trial. Therefore, this matter properly and timely raised. The Indiana Supreme Court has held that a serious breach of duty occurs when the prosecution willfully or intentionally, when unjustified by the public policy, obstructs the access to the defense material evidence in its possession. It is likewise a serious breach when, through lack of vigilance, the neglect, destruction, or withholding of material evidence by law enforcement officers of the prosecutor occurs. In such instances, grounds for reversal may exist. The Indiana Supreme Court has also held the negligent or intentional destruction of evidence by police can provide grounds for reversal or dismissal of due process due court law. I'm going to kind of skim through this because I think it's just kind of saying the same things that, going over why, and here's the case law as to, why it was a violation and could be dismissed. Because none of this is actually saying anything particular to this case. This is all saying that, this case here, like Williams versus State, this happened and this is why it was dismissed or looked into. It doesn't show anything here that says that's relative to this case particular. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, I just want to skim through it real quick. I hadn't read all this. I just kind of looked at it before, so I was reading this all with you guys. So yeah, that's all that was. It was nothing crazy. So that one video was the one where we not video, that one document was probably the biggest one. Let's see. I'm going to present. Next thing we're going to do is look at this video.
Bradley.
Pause it real quick. This is the former attorney of Richard Allen talking about his feelings towards the case and things like that. Real quick, I'm gonna look through the comment section real fast. Listening to this for the first time, those last few non-service of the search warrant seems like activity I've seen with confidential informants. That's interesting. That is interesting. The only thing is, if it was a confidential informant and they went forward and said some things, and it didn't go anywhere, because based on the information that we know and how they found Richard Allen had nothing to do with that investigation. Let's see. How do you feel about him confessing to his wife on a jail phone call? Like I said, I do think he was involved. And I think that he was probably being honest when he said that he was involved and that he did take those girls' lives. I don't know how, if anybody else was involved, but I would tend to believe it's possible. And when you have the possibility of that being the case, where it could be dismissed due to them not giving the stuff that they need to give, it begs the question, like, why, right? So, and I don't think it was coerced. His confession, it was on a phone call to his wife and I think to his mother. So coercion is usually typically like, for instance, if you're in an interrogation and you're being told things or whatnot. Now, I know that his statement says that, the jailers were making him confess or told him to tell his wife. We'll see. I don't know what was on that confession. So, if there was something specific to the case, and then it's probably going to be, used against them. That's for sure. What the hell is an Odinist? An Odinist. So basically, it was a religion, or it is a religion that follows Odin and Thor and Loki and those mythological gods from back in the day. And apparently, it's been taken over by some white nationalists, especially in the prison system. And they utilize that to congregate, especially like, for instance, on Sundays, in the prison system, you're allowed to go to religious ceremonies and whatnot. And so, some of these gangs will join up these religious ceremonies so they can congregate and meet with each other and do their, discussions and things like that. Let's see, just real quick. All right, let me go back to the bottom. Scary if you think about it. Since Idaho 4, everyone has bushy eyebrows. That's funny. That's funny. If I was coerced to confess, I wouldn't call my family. I would tell the cops what they want to hear, and that's all. I mean, not that I would ever false confess to anyone, but still. Yeah. The Villanders are the white supremacists. Yeah. That's what I heard. I don't want to call any of them or one of them one way or another because I honestly don't specifically know, but that's what I heard. All right, let's get into this interview. This is with Richard Allen's former attorney. Let's hear what he has to say.
Bradley Rosie and Andrew Baldwin issued a press release not too long into their getting the case, and they said they believe that Richard Allen is innocent. Do you have an opinion on that?
I do. I don't think Mr. Allen had anything to do with this. I honestly don't. Now, what I believe, nobody cares. My job would have been to convince 12 jurors of that.
You're a defense attorney, so that's your job to sort of say your client is innocent. Is that something you say about all your clients?
No, and rarely do I believe it. But in this particular case, I believe it. 100%.
All right, I want to stop right there and say this guy doesn't have to do this. He doesn't have to come out here and say that he believes he's innocent. He's no longer his lawyer or attorney. By him coming out here and making this statement, kind of puts his credibility on the line to a certain extent. He's going above and beyond for the innocence of a person who's accused of taking the lives of 2 little girls. Right. So usually and typically in a situation like this, where an attorney, was representing somebody and no longer is representing them, no comment is usually the situation. Right. But in this scenario, he's coming forward and he's saying that, there's some things that are going on that are a little bit weird. And he's saying that he thinks that Richard Allen is 100% innocent. I will say that in this case here, Richard Allen's defense attorneys are definitely doing and acting in the way that you would expect a defense attorney to act and want to try your case if you were in fact innocent or they in fact believed you are innocent. And that's not the same situation out there in Idaho. It's just the truth. Richard Allen's attorneys have all come forward saying he did not do this crime. He is innocent, 100% innocent, didn't do this. Bryan Kohberger's attorney has not once said that Bryan Kohberger did not commit that crime. Has not once said that he's innocent. So there is a big difference an approach by the attorneys. Makes you wonder why. Is there really something there? Because, the accusations that they're making against, the prosecution and the judge, they're out there. I mean, they're up there. There's some serious accusations that could lead to being disbarred if fabricated. They could lose their job if not only also lose their freedom, for contempt of court. So, like I said, it's very different. And this attorney here and the attorneys of Richard Allen are acting in a manner that I've never seen anybody act or a defense attorney act. And I think it's because these guys truly believe he's innocent. Now, I don't know if that he is or not. These guys know more of the case than I do. But I do think that they do think that he's innocent. I don't think they would be putting their necks on the line in the manner that they are if that wasn't the case.
And what convinced you?
Conversations with him, the fact that he lived in this very small community that's not much bigger than a high school. He worked at the CVS in Delphi. The police sketches are hung up in the CVS. The bridge guy picture is in the CVS. And in 5.5 years, no one comes into that store and says that kind of looks like you.
He does have a point, Now, I do want to say and emphasize that, that video of the bridge guy is grainy as you can't tell who they are. And based on the sketches of supposedly the same person and how different they are, you can tell that the persons that viewed them or saw those persons or that person on the bridge or wherever they saw them either didn't get a great view or wasn't really paying attention to who that person was. And why would they? If they saw somebody standing on the bridge, you're not going to see someone on the bridge and think automatically, hey, that guy's about to commit a heinous crime against 2 little girls in the next, few minutes. Let me remember everything about the guy. You probably are glancing at him and then turning around and walking away. And, most people, even in 2017, that's when the cell phone was becoming a big thing, right? Even Richard Allen was saying that he was on, checking his stock report or stock tracker on his phone. Most people when they're walking, they're listening to music or they're, looking at their phone and things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if the people that saw him, especially the person that was on the trail, it was very brief, maybe just a glimpse. And, how accurate can you get on a sketch or a description with that, especially after the fact? And so I'm not going to go as far as say that, those 2 sketches, were there and because they don't look like him and he's not the guy. They don't look like each other. Those sketches don't even look like each other for one to say that it is the guy. Because no matter what, even if he found somebody that did look like one of those sketches, his defense team is going to say that he doesn't look like the second one. Right? All right, let's see. Hunter Moon says Idaho and Delphi have DNA issues. I don't think so. I think Delphi might, not Idaho. Their DNA is pretty solid, in my opinion. Defenses can't argue Judge Gold didn't allow the attorney to scream from the rooftops. Allen is innocent by allowing this attorney to speak freely and not enforce a gag order. That's true. That is true. Let's continue.
And I don't know if this has any relevance, and, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but an arrest was made 27 days before a sheriff election.
Now, that is a pretty big accusation. Basically saying that the only reason you arrested my client is because of an election and to have some favor with the voters. I mean, that's a big accusation against a law enforcement official, an elected official. You want to have some proof for that, that there was something more nefarious. So I'm not sure with that implication if an elected official could sue a lawyer, especially if it has some sort of damages against him. It may not affect him this time around at this election. I don't know if he won or not. But if he did, or if he didn't, and he chooses to run in the future, and they use this statement against him, then he can sue this guy for defamation and a bunch of things if he can't prove the statements that he's saying. You know what I mean? Did Delphi get DNA? I thought they didn't. They didn't. But I don't know if not having DNA is going to be an issue, like a DNA issue. I think that they have his extraction marks and things like that. But yeah, like I said, here there's no DNA, which I said that could be an issue. But in Idaho, they got their DNA. It matched 5.8 octillion times or something like that. You got to go to like a parallel universe to find somebody else that has the same type of DNA that would have matched to also have matched Bryan Kohberger. So I think that's pretty strong. The fact that it was inside the button sheath, right? It's not on the outside of the sheath where, if you expected some transfer DNA to occur, you expect it on the outside of the sheath itself, on the, somewhere where it could be rubbed up against or touched against, something that is touched multiple times. But inside the button, that's pretty hard. That's really hard to put in there, And so, and then the other thing is, I know a lot of people say that thing must have been covered in blood. One, it's leather and it's face down, so leather repels water and things like that. So it wouldn't have gotten through. And two, it was face down, which means that there's probably other blood and DNA on the top of it from the victims. And the statement doesn't say that there's not. It just says that a single source of DNA was found in the button snap. Not that a single DNA source was found on the button snap. Just that the DNA that they found on the snap was a single source DNA. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's continue this.
Just my humble opinion that played some kind of role in his arrest. And he hadn't moved. He hadn't changed his story. No facts or evidence have changed, to my knowledge, that brought law enforcement back to him 5.5 years later.
All right. So what he said was that because nothing has changed, right, none of the story that Richard Allen said and those things, none of that has changed for them to re-look into him. Law enforcement can reinvestigate anybody. They don't really have to necessarily see something that changed. Obviously, they look past it, and that's what their claim is, that they look past it. They can go back and investigate him. So the claim that, because nothing has changed and now they're investigating him is a reason for corruption, I don't see the connection. I don't see the dots connected there on that one.
He has no criminal record. They raided his house, took all of his social media. There's no ties to this Odinistic cult whatsoever. He didn't even know that there was Odinist in Delphi. He had never heard of it.
So he just said that he didn't know that there was Odinist in Delphi. He'd never heard of it. Just want you to remember that.
Just a lot of things don't make sense.
Bradley Rosie and Andrew Baldwin also said that there's no electronic evidence linking him to the crime scene or the girls, and that there's no DNA of his at the scene. Is that accurate?
Yes. As far as I can tell, yes.
I do think that's going to be an issue. There's no DNA, there's no electronic evidence. It kind of boils down to, all right, what do they got? They got his statement that he was there and the extraction marks on the bullet. They got a video of him. I think it's 43 seconds long. We've only been previewed to a few seconds. So maybe there's more on that can identify him or be more of an identifier towards Richard Allen. If there's a close up or something. I feel that they can probably determine the height of the person on the bridge, given today's technology. All you got to do is just kind of determine, I think the standard length of a railroad tie is probably about 16 inches. And so if you got one that's 16 inches, then you can measure that out and you can measure the height of this individual. I will say that I was watching a video of Richard Allen playing pool. And one thing that I noticed was, yes, he was shorter than the majority of the people there, but he did not stick out like a sore thumb as being very short. not like he is when he's walking amongst, the officers and restraints. Now, is that because he's possibly wearing boots or maybe has inserts in his shoes that elevates his height? I think that's very much possible. It's not going to elevate him to like 6 foot or anything like that. But if you find out that the person on the bridge was somewhere between 5'4" and 5'8", I think that would be a very accurate estimate as to who that could be Richard Allen, even if it's on the higher side, of 5'8", 2 inches taller than what he is. So I just wanted to throw that out.
You had not heard of Odinism when it first was floated with regard to this case?
I honestly thought, I was like, no disrespect to Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Rosie, because they're excellent lawyers. I thought it was hocus pocus. I honestly didn't. I'd never heard of it. And the more I got into it, that's a real thing. It is a real thing, and it's scary.
In what way?
Well, I believe they sacrificed a girl and killed another one. Some of the people that live in Delphi were very brazen about their Odinistic beliefs on their Facebook pages and other social media accounts, including the sergeant who was in charge of keeping Mr. Allen safe in Westville.
So it was very brazen. You had sergeants that had these patches. We know that from the corrections office that they had these patches. He's going to talk about vehicles that have this insignia on their tire covers. Talk about how a lot of people in Delphi were very brazen about their beliefs, and yet Richard Allen, guy that lives in a small town of Delphi, works at the CVS. Has never heard of them. Has no idea who they are. Yet he's right in the epic center in the middle of all of it. And he don't know what it is. And I don't think that those two things can be right at the same time. You can't say, oh, he's never heard of it and he doesn't know anything about it. He's from a small town. Everybody knows him. There's pictures, on the wall. Nobody said that it was him. There's a video out there. Nobody said it was him because they all know him. And he doesn't know what this is yet. He was going to the same bar, I believe, that Patrick Westfall used to attend. And he don't know them in that small town? It's weird, right? Like the bar that he attends is the same bar that Patrick Westfall attended. And that was by Patrick Westfall's admission. It was in an interview that he did with True Crime Sleuth, and I think is his full name. Had him on the show. It was a while back. Like I said, he don't know this guy, although they, small town, same bar, drank together. This guy drank. He apparently, Richard Allen, that is, I think he's gone into rehab for drinking in the past. So, he was a guy that drank. The videos that are out there, he's consuming alcohol in a bar. So if he was a frequent member of that bar, in fact, there's a picture of him in a bar with the thing in the background, the sketches in the background. So if, he was a frequent at the bar, a small town, small bar, I used to go to a couple of bars in a small town it was a small town to me. It's like 25,000 people. And the bar that I frequent, that I was a regular at, I may not have personally hung out with everybody that was a regular there, but I knew who every one of them was. It's a small town. Everybody in that circle. So that's the part that I'm kind of like, maybe not. And then, just the fact that they kind of had that possible interaction in a bar, who's to say that there wasn't more out of that situation?
It's real. Just the other day, Robert and I were going to lunch, and we saw a Jeep Wrangler right here in Fort Wayne with a spare tire on the back, and the cover said Odin, and it had all Odin spears around on the cover. I would have never known what that meant, and outside this case. So Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Rosie were onto something right away.
You described one of those officers that's mentioned in one of Rosie and Baldwin's filings, Sergeant Jones, who was wearing patches that said, "In Odin We Trust," on his Department of Corrections uniform.
Yep.
The judge ordered the warden to make them stop. And then what did you notice?
That Mr. Jones had a tattooed under his right eye. From the best we can tell, it looks a lot like Odin's spear.
You know, that's some prison gang stuff, man. Getting tattoos under your eye of insignia of certain things. That is some prison gang stuff. Not going to lie. Not going to lie. You know, I think that that is a huge concern. You know, how is this guy still a member of the corrections team? Yeah, I get it. He's claiming it's his religious beliefs and stuff like that. But when you have those insignia and people utilizing that as a white supremacy group, and you're tattooing it to your face after you're told to take off the patches, is what I think that they're alluding to. I don't think they necessarily say that was the case, but they're alluding to the fact that they say the patches were gone, and then at that point is when we notice a face tattoo. So that's some weird stuff. Now, is it possible that, you know, Richard Allen maybe perhaps committed this crime with somebody else, you know, Elvis Fields, maybe another person out there? And is it possible that they went above and beyond what they were supposed to have done or not do at all, and they weren't accepted in, or because they, or maybe they, I don't know. If it was something that went too far and Patrick Westphal and Brad Holder are implicated into it, and they're the leaders of this Odinist group, you know, is it possible that, you know, one, they're not going to bring it up, they're not going to dime anybody? That's probably some sort of code, you know, not to be a rat, right? And so, you know, once he gets arrested and they're found out that it's possibly him, you know, they're probably going to make sure and ensure he don't dime on everybody else. So I can see at that point, you know, if that ends up being the case, and let's just say they have some law enforcement or correction officers under their thumb, Brad Holder and Patrick Westphal, that is, you know, I can see it, you know, but it's pretty elaborate. It's pretty out there though at the same time. But one thing that I'll say is that, you know, we had, what was his name? He's from Delphi After Dark, Rick Snay, on the show, and he's from Logansport, Indiana. And he wasn't aware of the Odinist group by name per se. But one thing he said about that area is that it is full of the white supremacist groups that are out there. You know, they're full of white supremacist groups there. And that it is a true thing out there. So I don't know. I've never been out there to that part of Indiana. I've been to Indianapolis, and that's probably as far as in Indiana I've gone in. But yeah, his tattoo, that's just weird. Let's see. Let's continue.
And he had several tattoos on his forearms, including the interlocking triangles that are on his Facebook post. I got to give credit to Mr. Rosie and Mr. Baldwin, and, you know, they picked up on that. We saw him, and, you know, confinement officers at the Allen County Jail aren't even allowed to have facial hair, let alone facial tattoos. I was a little miffed that the warden allowed that, or, you know, he even knew what it was.
He looks.
We had visited him on several occasions, but, you know, driving 4 hours each way was difficult.
So, you know, the announcer there said he seems a little bit scared talking about Odinist. I'd say that he does appear to be shaken. Is that a, you know, a natural thing, or is he really scared, or is it a little bit of an act? I don't know. I mean, lawyers got to act every now and then, right? I mean, that's presentation is part of their spiel, right? Getting up there, sounding confident, being able to be persuasive, especially defense attorneys. You know, they have to persuade 12 jurors, or at least one juror out of 12, that their client didn't commit a crime. So I don't know, but he did seem nervous at the very least. You know, maybe he understands how big this case is, and the publicity it gets, and how many people are going to be watching this. interview, and maybe he knows that, he's in front of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people in that situation, and he is nervous and could not have anything to do with the case itself. So quite possible.
And then at Wabash, they're not set up for visitation, so we were literally in a makeshift kitchen, and he was in a cell. We had to stand 6 feet back, and he's talking through the slot where they put the tray of food through.
This I don't understand either. Like, even if you're found guilty of something and you're being, you've been convicted and you're sentenced to this corrections facility, there's appeals, there's other things that happen after court that continue. The court doesn't end, the trial doesn't end with the guilty verdict. Now, if it's a not guilty verdict, then that's it. That's where the trial ends. You can't get tried twice, right? But if it's a guilty verdict, that's not where it ends. And even in the Bryan Kohberger case, his attorneys are expecting this court case to last 28 years by their own, that's what they said. 28 years is what they're expecting. Pretty much means they're expecting their client to lose, but, that's what he said. And that's very much true. Just because there's a guilty verdict doesn't mean that that's over with. And you would anticipate that those that are sentenced or incarcerated at this corrections facility would have the ability and availability to talk with their lawyers about pending appeals and things of that nature. So I do find it very suspicious and very odd that they don't have a place for attorneys to speak with their clients. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand why that's the case. I understand why he's in a corrections facility, a maximum security facility versus, a jail or a county facility. One being the amount of people and employees that they probably have. I mean, when you look at a small town corrections place, it's probably not going to pay as high as the maximum security prison, right? So you're probably, majority of your guards going to go to that maximum security. So that county, jail is probably understaffed, right? And when you have somebody that needs 24-hour security, that's a whole new team. You can't pull somebody off, of doing something else to watch Richard Allen. You have to add somebody to watch Richard Allen. And if they're already understaffed, that makes things difficult. So I'm not surprised he's where he's at, but I am shocked that they don't have an area for him to talk with his attorneys appropriately.
And that's not a very conducive way to have meaningful conversations with your client. I couldn't hand him documents. I couldn't have him sign documents. And, I'm sure it was very difficult for him to see the videos we were showing him through that slot. So, I'm not criticizing the Department of Corrections. I mean, for whatever reason, he was moved there. They're not set up for visitation, but you can't have I couldn't have been prepared for trial even October if that was how all the visits were going to be conducted.
And you've handled death penalty cases. Have you ever had a pre-trial defendant treated the same way as Richard Allen?
Never. In my 25 years, or Stremin's 25 years, have we ever had a murder client held pre-trial in a maximum security facility and then was transferred from one maximum security facility to another. Never.
And in your motion to transfer, you guys described him as being treated like Hannibal Lecter.
Particularly in Westville, at least we were allowed to sit face to face across the table from him. But the way he was handcuffed and to his chest, I mean, it looked extraordinarily uncomfortable. I couldn't shake his hand. We couldn't have him sign anything.
I wonder, it is odd the way they have him handcuffed to his chest, with his hands in that position. I've never seen it. Then again, I've never worked in a jail. I've visited the jail, obviously, when transporting people. I've seen, high profile criminals, whether they be elected officials or something, be strapped, when you're in segregation. I've seen where you'll have the chains around the waist, the ankle the ankle locks and you're handcuffed to the chain around your waist in front of you, but there isn't a contraption that twists your arms in the manner in which Richard Allen's hands are twisted. I wonder if they're doing that because he did something. Did he try to grab something, or whether it be a weapon of some kind from a correction officer at one point? I mean, I know that there's been reports that he had to be subdued and or tased. I don't know how accurate those reports are. I've just kind of seen them in the comment section and other people disclose that or talk about it. But if those are true, it's, if he's getting hosed or he's getting sprayed with pepper spray or having to be subdued, it's usually for a reason. It's not just like, hey, let's go subdue this guy for no reason. And so I wonder if that reason had to do with maybe him trying to grab a taser or, a baton or something from one of the correction officers, and now they have him in a position where he can no longer do that. But either way, I don't know. I don't understand why he's like that. I mean, that's the only thing that I can come up with, the only scenario that I can come up with to have him strapped that way. It is weird. Like I said, I've seen, and it's not uncommon for those in segregation, especially if they're violent criminals, for them to have the ankle shackles, the hands shackled to the waist, but not like that. That's weird. That is weird. And I've never seen it before. I mean, this is the first time I've ever seen anybody handcuffed like that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is somebody else. If you guys have seen another inmate or convict or somebody in jail, maybe if you're a corrections officer, or reach out. I want to know if this is normal, if this is if there's a reason behind it. Let me know. I'd appreciate it.
I visited clients in prison on several occasions. That was different than anything I've ever experienced before.
And the way his hands were shackled were similar to how we see him in court, right?
Yes,
Where
exactly
it's like the
way.
tops of the hands are touching.
Yes.
And it's way up high on his chest.
It's connected to a box on his chest. I've never seen that. I've never seen anyone confined in that manner before.
So why? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. He is 5'6", 120, 130 pounds. He is not a physical threat to anyone. From all accounts, he's been a model citizen.
I mean, I don't think that his size has anything to do with it. Daniel Cavalcante was about 5'6", 140 pounds, and he was one of the most dangerous persons out there. He committed violent crimes against his girlfriend here and abroad against another girlfriend. He escaped prison, was able to be on the run in the elements for an extended period of time, and he was about that size. So don't let size distract you from what somebody is capable of doing, in my opinion.
Because he's locked down 23 hours a day. We told the confinement officers that we wanted him unhandcuffed so we could shake his hand and maybe have him sign documents, and they weren't budging on that. And it was sad because Westville allows visits, so his wife could come see him. And they just set up a visit with his mom and dad. He was transferred to Wabash 2 days before that visit. Now, I don't think one had anything to do with the other. I just think it was bad timing and a coincidence. But in Wabash, you're not allowed any visits. Obviously, attorney, but no family members.
So they're depriving him from visiting his family members. I mean, that I can do some stuff to a man's mind. Being shackled in 23 hours a day, things like that. But just be advised, if he ends up being convicted of this crime, if jury of his peers find him guilty and say that there is enough sufficient evidence to find him guilty beyond reasonable doubt, that's going to be the rest of his life. 23 hours in a cell. Anytime he does leave, he's probably going to be handcuffed in that manner. If he ends up being put in that situation where he's in the Wabash Correction Facility again, he's not going to be able to have visitors. I don't think he'll probably be there. I don't know. I don't even know if they're going for the death penalty in this case or not. But given the extreme publicity of the case, and the nature and extreme nature of the crime, he's going to be in segregation. If he's found guilty, his entire I'm sure if they find him guilty his entire life. This is how those that commit heinous crimes against children are treated. I'm, for one, not really opposed to treating those that commit heinous crimes against children in the manner that they're being treated. If you can't do the time or live in those type of scenarios where, the consequences of the outcome of the actions that this person takes or you take, then don't do the crime. Let this be a wake up to those that, maybe perhaps have an idea of doing something heinous. That's a life you can expect to live. And that's probably the life you'd want to live. You don't want to be in general population. If you've done something heinous to a little girl or to any children, just kind of throwing that out there. Let's see. I'm going to go through some comments and then we'll be calling it a show here pretty soon. Let me go up through the top. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. Yes, we're still talking about Delphi. Let's see. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit and then come down. Let's see. Odin is specifically. They're in every state. Odin is specific. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'll be honest. So we have our other intro video, right? And it has a song in it. And in that song, he has a logo. And it's 3 triangles that are interlocking. And I put his logo on our intro music because this was the artist and whatnot. And this was before, obviously, we're talking about the Odinist theory. And as soon as they said and showed those images, I was like, that's kind of weird because that's the same logo that, the artist has that's in our theme song. So just kind of throwing that out there. But yeah, Odinists are everywhere. I mean, I think that I had a comment in the comment section. I looked it up. Like, there's a lot of Odinist stuff in American society that you don't even know. Like Wednesday is derived of Odin's day, and Thursday is derived from Thor's day. Right? If you go look at your phone, pull down the little thing and look at your Bluetooth symbol. That symbol is a combination rune for connectivity. That is also a Odinist type but symbol. It's everywhere. I mean, it's every day we probably look past it, don't even know, but it's everywhere. Let's see. Inside of the female end. I'm not sure what you're talking about there. It's very sketchy that he is not able to talk to his lawyers in a private room. Well, I mean, you can't leave him in a private room because what if he attacks his lawyers, right? And then the corrections facility is going to be responsible for leaving a person that is accused from committing a heinous crime against 2 small little girls, and you left him alone with his lawyers, even at the request of his lawyers. If something happens, it's at the responsibility of the corrections facility. So I don't think that it's wrong, for corrections officers to be present during their conversations. Now, obviously, there's some concerns in this specific case, because there's some accusations against the correction officers that are sitting in. But in most cases, I don't think it would be an issue. Let's see. I think that comes from them trying to build a case that could very well be framing them. I agree, not right, though. Seems to be allowed. I'm not sure what you're referring to. This occurred near a river bend, required crossing. Yeah, I feel like footprints would play a role. He got to wear like little size 8s. Biggest he could fake would be 10s. Yeah, that's true. I would think so too. And that's one of the things that we talked about before in the past. It's like, when it came to like Ronald Logan, and the FBI really being hard on him, I was like, if Richard Allen committed this crime, Ron Logan's like a lot bigger than, I think he's like 6'2" or something like that. I highly doubt he's got small feet like like Richard Allen. And I mean, how would you explain that you have 3 footprints and they're all small, and you're trying to say it's Ron Logan? You know what I mean? So, John Malkovich to play attorney in this movie. That would be cool, actually. I think that would work. What if he's really guilty and this is a direct result of the reaction to his accusations? Like, how gross can you be to do that, let alone this now? Like I said, I do think that he had a part in this crime. The timeline is too tight, you know, and based on his own admissions, he went to that bridge, and he would have been at that bridge at the right appropriate time. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know what to think about this case anymore. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I used to think it was pretty straightforward until that memorandum dropped on the Odinist theory. Let's see. Please hit that like and subscribe. 100%. I'd appreciate that. Not guilty doesn't equal innocence, but he has a right to a fair fight. 100%. This is probably the best comment and most reflective of what I'm saying. I think that this guy did do it or had some part into it because of the timeline he puts himself there. I think that there's a possibility for others to be involved. And I think that the way the police handled this situation, it might be difficult to find a guilty verdict or to come across a guilty verdict from a jury at this point. I don't know all the evidence. I don't know what else, you know, the prosecution and law enforcement has. They could have something else that could be a smoking gun that we just don't know. And the defense is just, you know, purposely, you know, holding that stuff out when it comes to these interviews. It's quite possible. But at this point, like I said, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to get a conviction in this case in any direction. Let's see. Exactly. Hunter wasn't there blood splattered everywhere, like on trees and most likely on the ground? So I've actually seen the pictures that were leaked. And I'll say that there wasn't blood around where their bodies were. It was clean. I cannot tell based on the pictures if they were dragged or how far they were dragged. Libby had blood on her in different areas of her body. Abby didn't. And Abby was wearing the clothes that Libby was wearing. So even if, let's just say, you know, the incident occurred with her in the water and it washed away everything. And then they put clothes on top of her after the fact, right? After she passed. And after a certain time, no more blood's going to be coming out. So even if he's moving her around and putting him in different positions, you're not going to see, what do you call it? A blood everywhere. They were extremely pale, which I'm trying to remember some of the dead bodies I've seen in person of how fast they got pale. And I'll say that these girls looked more pale. I'm going through a few people. Yeah, and these girls were like, it almost looked like there was a filter on them to make them look pale. You know what I mean? It was like, I think Libby almost looked like to me, it almost looked like it was a fake picture. It didn't look real because of how pale she was. It looked like there was a heavy filter on it. Now, if this crime was committed short, you know, somewhere there, right, like 10 feet away, and they were dragged into that position, I think that's possible. You know, from the pictures, you can't tell one way or another, like if they were dragged or not. I can't tell if they were, you know, I don't think they were hung. I didn't see any markings on Libby's ankles or legs that would indicate that she was hanging upside down, you know, to be bled out. It did not look like that at all. So I don't know. It's a tricky situation. But again, I think there's only like 4 photos, and I can guarantee you that crime scene is a lot more than 4 photos. So we don't know everything. We don't know when those photos were taken. Were there things picked up yet or not picked up? What part of the day? I don't know. It's weird. Let's see. Let's continue. Unconstitutional. How has no one stopped it if there isn't justified reason? This case is so high profile. I don't know. Why do you think Delphi didn't draw as much obsession as Idaho? I think it did. It did early on. The difference is, this case occurred in 2017, and folks, didn't get an arrest until, 2020, and then right around that time, Bryan Kohberger committed the crime that he committed or is alleged to have committed, and that sparked interest like crazy. Also, 2017 and now it's a little bit different when it comes to reach, people on social media, content getting out there to more people. So I think that probably plays a more pivotal role as well as to why Idaho just kind of spread like wildfire. I am psychic. Thursday. Yeah, I think that's right. I could be wrong. Go check it out. Somebody said that in the comment section. Let's see. I thought white supremacists were into the Norse mythology stuff. I mean, some of them are. Doesn't mean that they all are, and doesn't mean that that everybody that's into Norse mythology is a white supremacist. Let's see. Wasn't one clothed and the other girl was the unclothed and the other girl's clothes on? There really is nothing saying about that where blood was or wasn't aside from the tree. I do think I remember them saying that there was blood, but it was a little bit further out. I don't know how much blood or whatnot, but I do remember reading somewhere around there that there was. Drained the blood, where they'd even come from. There's been nothing addressing that as a leak, so I don't believe it. That has been speculated. That I think it's even in the 136-page memorandum from the defense team that they speculated that they were drained. I think they even said that Abby died a slow death as she bled out, and so that has been a part of what the defense has stated. Doesn't this remind you of Making a Murderer? I saw part of Making a Murderer. There was some weird stuff there too, but I don't know the entire case. I know that there's a what's it called? Daily Wire film on Making a Murderer and how there was some real evidence tying him to the case. Lawyer here, we are often met with clients, even those accused of murder, alone in a room often. The client isn't handcuffed and, basically are told where the panic button is. Interesting. Thank you for that clarification, Angie. That's good to know. Like I said, I'm not an attorney. I've never been in a situation where I needed one in a cell or in a prison. So I honestly had no idea, but thank you for clearing that up. They're still handcuffed. Yeah. I mean, I can only tell you what I've seen in off of interrogations and stuff. But even at that's in a police interrogation room. But yeah, I haven't seen a conversation in a jail, to be honest with you. Never have. Reminds me of Twin Peaks. We need a woman with a pet dog. For some reason, choked him up when you said, "What if he harmed an attorney?" I mean, he could. What if he did? Right? I mean, he did something enough for them to tase him. I don't necessarily think that everybody's part of this conspiracy, right? I don't. I do think that maybe there is some suspicious activity going on, but I don't think everybody is. And so if he got tased or, had to be, how can I put it? Had to be for his own safety, strapped down or whatever the case may be, right? Locked up or handcuffed or whatever. I don't think that it was because of anything other than he was doing something that required that action. You get what I'm saying? Now, is it possible that, if there is a shady, corrections officer, is he waiting for Richard Allen to make a mistake so he can go in there and, take care of business? That's possible. Everything has a meaning to a sign where they were making a weak attempt at coverage. Daniel allegedly told his wife and mom that he did kill the 2 girls. I don't know. I don't understand why he's being treated like he's already be convicted. He looks sickly. Here's the thing. From what I heard was that he confessed to his wife, and then after that confession, he started to go crazy. He started to eat his own papers. He started to lose weight rapidly, started to get in trouble, started to get into situations where, he had to be tased and those type of things. Is it because of, where he was? I don't know. It kind of seemed like it went from one day to another when his attorneys were speaking about it. Is it because maybe it slipped out and then he remembered that he's being recorded and now he's screwed and now he's just going nuts because he screwed up? That's possible too. Let's see. Do we know if there were leaves on them as well? No. I don't recall there being leaves on any of them. I will say this, there's been a lot of debate on Abby, whether or not she had horns or not, or if those sticks were there already. Those sticks were placed on her. Now, whether or not the sticks were placed on her in the manner that they were found is up for debate. There were smaller twig-like sticks, and they could have easily moved in the wind or an animal walking by, checking out the deceased bodies. But they were on top of her hair. So her hair was, I think it was in a bun, in a ponytail. Yeah, I want to be honest. I want to be accurate. Let me pull them up real quick. I think I still got them. So, it was a long time ago that I got them. So, I don't know. There's crime scene photos from Idaho that nobody's seen. I got them. I got to go through them, but I think her hair was tied up. And it didn't look like her hair was wet either. It looked like her hair was dry. But then again, this was over 24 hours or the next day after she had been, her life was taken. So it's quite possible that, had she been in the water, if wet, that it would have dried by then. But given how cold it was, I'm not sure. I got to find them. They're somewhere. They're probably in my folder somewhere. But those sticks were placed on the hair. Her hair wasn't on top of it. It was on the hair and kind of maybe even in the hair. So I do think that those were placed there purposefully. But where there's leaves and dirt, no, I didn't see that. To me, they look like those sticks were purposefully placed in the position that they were. I just don't see a symbol out of it. Like anything that I have seen from everything that is out there, it doesn't look like there's any pattern to it to a certain extent. There's one point where the sticks kind of line up on Abby's, but it's just a high point. It just seems like they were putting things on top of her. It could have even have been like the plan was to throw almost like a teepee, right? It could have been like something like that, but a smaller version on top of her body. And maybe the plan was to cover it up, right? With leaves or something. And, somebody hurt him. I don't know. It's weird. I think they'll take the jury to the crime scene. Probably not. Unless they ask for it. If the defense team comes out and says that, this should have been heard or seen from the bridge, you can see this, you can hear this, then yeah, they might go back out there and do some tests. I'm going to read maybe a handful more, and that's going to be it. Was there another crime scene crime site found nearby the girls with blood. Yeah, I thought the F tree wasn't. I thought the F tree was not where the bodies were. It was a little bit further away. So Libby wasn't under the F tree. That F tree was elsewhere. Let's see. Wasn't the one dressed wearing other girls' clothes? Yes, that's true. That is accurate. To drain one's blood would be radioactivity. Yes, maybe. I mean, could also be some crazy guy thinking he's a vampire. It could be that they were just cut in an artery and they bled out. And, while he was setting up one or the other or whatever the case may be. And when he moved him, it just appears that it was drained. If there's no blood there or little blood to be found, and there's no evidence that it was done in the water, so to speak, then yeah, I mean, you're going to question, was it collected? If it was collected, then more than likely it was. All right. You would think that if it was collected, it was some sort of ritual type of thing. That's going to be the question. Was it collected or not? I stopped following this case when so much conspiracy started. Yeah, no, I get it. But once you start seeing that maybe there's a little bit of truth behind it, it's pretty crazy. Pineapple pizza, don't get the wrong idea. Restraint for safety concerns. Yeah, I know, I get the restraint for safety concerns. I just don't understand the manner in which his hands were facing. I've never seen it personally. I do. A lot of people always ask me, why do you think this? What do you know? What don't you know? Were they sprinkled with blood? It looked like Libby was. But it also looked like, yeah, it did look like Libby was. Some water, somewhere in the water, so it would have guessed washed away. Yeah, I think that there was some clothes in the water. So and that clothes obviously would have been Abby's clothes because she was wearing Libby's clothes. So is it possible that that's where that crime was committed and that's why there's little blood, is because, Abby lost her life somewhere around the river? I think so. Standing at the scene had great impact on my thoughts of the case. Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, then yeah, they probably would take the jury out there. Poor girls, yes. He is guilty. Well, we'll see. It was collected. It was definitely ritualistic. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen anything saying that it actually was 100% collected. I think it's been theorized that it was collected, but that's about it. But all right, guys, that's all I got for you guys today. Please hit that like and subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Appreciate all that. I'll probably be back on maybe tomorrow, not for sure Friday. Make sure you keep an eye out on those notifications. Let's see. Which LE claims motorcycle tire prints were near the crime scene? That's the first I've heard of it. If it's there, please let me know. But with that being said, I'm out of here, guys. Y'all have a great night. Peace.